Welcome, everyone. Wonderful to see so many of you trickling in. Our numbers are rising by the second, so we'll give everyone a chance to get settled and go ahead and get started in another minute. All right. Good morning. Welcome to the 7th annual MCURC all-member meeting. We are absolutely delighted to have you here. Less delighted that we're joining each other virtually, but really excited for the incredibly rich and actionable set of insights that we have in store for you throughout the next 2 days. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sophie Egan, proud co-director of the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative. And we're gonna share the agenda for today and then hand it around the torch of our fabulous leadership and tremendous collaborators across the collaborative. In just a couple of minutes, we'll dig into that. But first, we're going to have some MCURC 101, the year in review and insights from our sponsors through their short and sweet videos. We'll then dig into our beloved research showcase, our collective impact presentation. We'll hear from the co-chairs of our racial equity working group about advancing racial equity at the intersection of healthy, sustainable, delicious food choices, and close out for day one. Just a quick heads up, there won't be time, unfortunately. We have the condensed program in the virtual space based on prior feedback over the years. So there won't be time for a verbal Q&A throughout, but please use the chat, say hello to friends and meet some new ones, engage with speakers through questions. And if there is time at the end of any presentations, we will have all of our moderators field those questions in the chat. So no need to be quiet in the chat, but we will have you all unmute and we'll be respecting our speakers' time by ensuring that everyone remains on mute while they are speaking. So MCURC 101, even for those of you who have been with us from the beginning, sometimes it's helpful just to hear the really grounding and return us to our roots of who we are, what we're trying to accomplish together, and maybe learn a few things that you didn't even realize we're up to here in the collaborative. So we were founded in 2014, a partnership of the Culinary Institute of America and Stanford Medicine's Stanford Prevention Research Center and Residential and Dining Enterprises. Our vision is cultivating the long-term well-being of all people and the planet, one student, one meal at a time. Our mission is a collaboration of forward-thinking scholars, food service leaders, executive chefs, and administrators for colleges and universities who are accelerating efforts to move people toward healthier, more sustainable, and delicious foods using evidence-based research, education, and innovation. We're brought together by a shared conviction that students are the best way forward. We look at the opportunity of each day in our distinct operations, and you'll hear about that collective purchasing power and the collective footprint of our dining programs in our collective impact initiative. But we also look at the future potential, the 15 billion meals that students will consume throughout their collective lifetimes, and the distinct period of identity formation that's occurring during one's college years as this pivotal moment that we can help shape not only their preferences and palates, show how truly delicious, healthy, and sustainable foods can be throughout their experiences in the dining halls, but also help shape their values, their ability to vote with their forks, vote with their dollars, their grocery dollars, and ultimately, as tomorrow's leaders, entrepreneurs, and consumers, help collectively signal the demand and generate that demand for the marketplace, whether it's food service, retail, or beyond, that they want, that really is aligning human health and environmental health. They'll also be parents, and they'll have the chance to be acting in making decisions on behalf of not only themselves, but again, perhaps as leaders, perhaps on behalf of organizations and their family members. So the potential is tremendous, and we take this very seriously. We not only engage students in our work, but we bring together for the first time these roles across campuses that traditionally really don't often speak to one another. There's been historically a lot of silos, particularly between academia, academic faculty, and dining leaders, even though oftentimes we're all working on questions of food choice and food systems. So we bring together these roles of senior university administrators, dining directors, executive chefs, student fellows, nutrition sustainability managers with academic faculty. That's one of the 3 core ways that we're fostering collaboration. And together we're accelerating innovation, advancing menus of change principles, and pioneering research that you'll hear all about in the research showcase. We're also fostering collaboration within academic faculty across disciplines, because food systems research, food choice, food behavior, eating behavior type of research requires fundamentally transdisciplinary approaches. So getting out of those academic silos in addition to the departmental silos is critical to what we're all about. And then of course, the multi-site potential of collaborating across multiple universities through our multi-site behavioral research model is again one of the most groundbreaking ways that we bring people together. Our common language, our foundation, is the 24 principles of healthy, sustainable menus put forward by the Culinary Institute of America and Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. This is really this integrated one-stop shop for aligning health and sustainability imperatives when food service leaders are making critical decisions in their operations about their menu concepts, about purchasing, and beyond. And you can learn all about Menus of Change at menusofchange.org. But as a collaborative, we've really grown over the years, and we are now at 272 total members, 60 colleges and universities, 3 ex officio members, 5 research collaborators, and increasingly international. Our membership is extensive and inclusive, includes a wide variety of geographic locations, student population types, public and private, large and small, and we're grateful for the opportunity to work alongside organizations that may not be academic institutions, but have mission-aligned objectives and also have critical expertise and subject matter expertise and critical experience to lend to our work. So we work with research collaborators at EAT, Food for Climate League, leanpath.org, ReFed, and World Resources Institute, and also ex officio members such as Google, LinkedIn, and US Olympic Training Center. This is our organizational structure. We could not do the work we do without the vision, the pioneering leadership of Dr. Shirley Everett of Stanford and Greg Drescher of the CIA. They really helped to incubate the ideas that are now brought to life through our 7-year-long organization. And of course, co-directors, my fellow co-director, Eric Montel, unfortunately has been pulled into a meeting. I'm sure many of you are experiencing this on your campuses, dealing with emerging issues, but he looks forward to joining us today and tomorrow whenever he's available to join us, but he sends everyone his very best. And our critical leadership across the committees and working groups are fundamentally essential to making all of the work and projects that we're spearheading possible. And we rely on our advisory council for strategic guidance on the collaborative as a whole, and just grateful for this tremendous collective effort. Again, we also could not do the work we do without our fabulous mission-aligned sponsors. So these are our founding sponsors, and these are our 2021 sponsors. Tremendously grateful for their support and terrific expertise that they lend as valued peers in this effort. Research is in our very name, right? And the crux of our research is about shifting diets. We aim to develop scalable, applied solutions to promote healthy, sustainable, and delicious food choices. And we do this in a couple of different ways. You'll hear more about this in detail, but essentially it's academic research, the more traditional, bound for peer-reviewed publication kind of research that is rigorous, that it may take a long time, but we also do operational research, the so-called quick and dirty kind of research that really is incredibly valuable in the real world to operators. And across all of our research, we're actually involving as essential co-creators of research those in dining leadership positions, which again is not historically been done. But the reason for that is to ensure that the research that's conducted has real world applications. And this is so essential to everything that we do in our research, that the outputs of these different kinds of research might be, yes, absolutely, those gold star publications in peer-reviewed academic journals, and we have quite a few under our belts now, but also might be reports, toolkits, guidelines, trainings, and we generate a variety of resources depending on the project. And across these 4 specific areas, one of the things to mention, and I'm sure those who participate in the MCURC see this, is that we are a member-driven organization. So these 4 areas of focus, while we have the menus of change principles as our North Star, again, our common language, that's a big set of possible directions. And we've really appreciated the need to focus our efforts over the years and have continued to iterate on what those focus areas are. But essentially they fall into these 4 categories. So ultimately our research aims to advance plant-forward diets, reduce food waste, look at the power of reduced portion size to boost quality over quantity and rethink the food experience, and also food literacy and the real interplay between education and research and the increasing recognition of how synergistic and how interconnected these are to actually evaluate the impact of education on food choices and vice versa, and really expanding the definitions of education. So that's our research agenda, our research pipeline. This is just a snapshot of all the research projects within the research working group that are completed, underway, or on the horizon. You can check out all the published research projects on our website. And just while I have you all here, wanted to make sure you're aware of the many resources that are at your fingertips. Everything we create in the MCURC is open source. It is designed to be used to inspire the entire industry and really provide a suite of tools. It's not only thought leadership, but for practical applications in this broader arena of change makers that Menus of Change has brought together, and who look to College and University Food Service as the horizon, the what is ahead, what is the future of the industry. So you can, for not only colleagues in campus dining, but those outside of campus dining, can check these out at our resources tab on moccollaborative.org. These include resources for communication, strategy, training, menu inspiration, and across a wide range of topics from food waste to globally inspired plant-forward recipes, many of the different Menus of Change principles, as well as early learnings report from our Collective Impact Initiative, which is so valuable for reducing food-related greenhouse gas emissions in your protein portfolios. There are some materials that are more internal in nature. We're very transparent across our committees and working groups. So for members, you can see, even if you're not participating in a working group, you can see the materials that are generated by those. You can check out past newsletters and so forth. And there's a portal not only for members, but for sponsors with similarly valuable materials. All of the contact information can be found here. And with that, I'm going to pivot to year in review. Hopefully you saw the newsletter we sent out that captured the pretty remarkable set of things that occurred in 2021, pandemic notwithstanding. But I wanted to just share some shout outs, some thanks, and I'll let you know of some materials that came out of this past year. So this is a slide we love to show. It's our rocket ship. I'm not going to go through all of it, but it just indicates what an upward trajectory we've been on. And we have progress that we consider sort of collaborative wide on the top, and then specifically with our research impact, because again, research is the core of what we're doing. One of the things we're very pleased is to have launched our racial equity working group. You're going to hear from our co-chairs later on. And the objectives there are to make the MCURC a vehicle for racial equity and anti-racist leadership, and to ensure equitable access to the healthy, sustainable, delicious food choices that all of us across MCURC member institutions are working to advance each day. We also reimagined the Education and Working Group into the Education and Systems Innovation Working Group with a real focused agenda on these three key work streams. The first is about integrating menus of change into college curricula and more broadly expanding food systems courses on university campuses and building on the education exchange that we produced not long ago that is essentially a repository of existing curricula being taught that anyone can build upon, whether you're an academic faculty member or a non-traditional instructor, anyone in a position to be teaching food systems type of content, and really look forward to helping provide additional support to make sure that food system careers are widely accessible and widely seen as a path forward for students who really are that next generation of food systems leaders. And that's this other work stream on the right, our Student Fellows Program, who you'll also be hearing from later on in the program. And then in the middle here, we have Pathways to Operational Excellence. And this is about that essential translation of research findings into processes that actually help improve operations. So again, coming back to this common thread of the real world applications of our research, not doing research for research's sake, but ensuring that we're maximizing the potential impact. And again, it's research, but also education. Education in the sense of training, marketing, any ways that we're communicating these menus of change principles. Our huge welcome and thanks to all of these new leaders we brought on in the past year. Co-managers of the MCURC Fellows Program. These are 3 student leaders, first time in our history that we've had student leaders. Marcus Conde, Charlie Hoffs, and Naila Varawala. Co-chairs of our Racial Equity Working Group, Pat Bando and Chris Williams. Our new chair of the Education and Systems Innovation Working Group, Dr. Jenny J. And our new leader of the Education Working Group, Education and Systems, and that's Anna Bobat from LinkedIn. Sincere welcome to some new member institutions in the past year. University of Reading, based in the UK, it was actually our first full international member institution. This means they not only have academic representation, which we've had in a variety of places around the world, but actually have dining represented. We also welcome Central Washington University and LinkedIn as an ex officio member. Much more to come in the research showcase, but I really want to applaud especially these milestones in our research, which we're publishing our 4th multi-site study, Food Choice and Waste, and this was in the journal Foods. We had the second phase of our operational research study, Resilience of the University Food System, and an enormous collaborative effort across 19 member institutions. And then, although it was an MCURC study specifically, a number of members worked together and actually published an article in the journal Public Health Nutrition all about attitudes and beliefs about how chefs can essentially promote nutrition and sustainable food systems. We were featured for thought leadership in the news. Several of those studies that I mentioned, that Food Choice and Waste study was picked up quite a bit. And we also had our Collective Impact Initiative publicly acknowledged for the first time. This was in Bloomberg, and it was a big moment for us as this has been a largely internal effort, but it demonstrated that this notion of collective impact can actually be done in practice, and really highlighted the rise of climate-friendly eating and how college and university food service is a key leader in offering those options and shifting our purchasing practices to be lower emissions, lower emitting portfolios. We held 4 insights exchanges. These were launched during the start of the pandemic and turned out to be hugely popular, really a way to provide community and connection, commiseration perhaps, and some practical strategies to sort through challenges that all of you are facing. So the first one last year focused on research. We focused also on driving climate action and heard a variety of sustainability solutions, ensuring that sustainability does not get put on the back burner during the pandemic, and how we can all work together in support of that. Did a deep dive on food waste solutions, and then a repeat, essentially, or a round 2 of a crowd favorite focused on pandemic pivots and continued resilience of the university food system. I won't steal the thunder of our Collective Impact Initiative. I just want to say what a huge, again, collective effort this was. 20 institutions participated in the past year, and we also might want to acknowledge Jackie Bertoldo, who leads that initiative, for securing our spot in the Food Systems Game Changers Lab. This was hosted by EAT, Open IDEO, Thought for Food, and the Rockefeller Foundation, and really global recognition of how game-changing an idea this collective impact initiative truly is. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Shara, who will walk you through some videos from our sponsors.
Great. Thank you so much, Sophie, and good morning, everyone. As Sophie mentioned, the MCURC could not exist without the generous support of our sponsors, and we are really grateful to each of those organizations who recognize the true value in bringing this incredible network together. To give our members a better sense of these innovative organizations, we asked them to compile a short video to share insights into why they engage with the MCURC. As a reminder, you can always find the current list of MCURC supporters on the website with links to their websites as well as statements of health and sustainability. So without further ado, I'm excited to share insights from our sponsors.
Applegate does things right. We do things right for people, we do things right for the planet, we do things right for animal welfare.
Applegate has a long history of being bold and daring in the marketplace. It's always been a brand that's been about challenging conventions, challenging the industry.
If we have an opportunity to procure something that aligns with the heart and the love that we put into our food, that's a home run for us.
Hi, I'm Yuri Krasilovsky, food service and R&D chef with Barilla America. Welcome to this introduction to Barilla Frozen, our new best-in-class innovation in pre-cooked pasta for food service. Here are the top 3 reasons we set out to develop the Barilla Frozen line. We developed Barilla Frozen to be an easy solution and to deliver the same performance and durability you expect from Barilla. Check out our collection of videos in this series to find cooking instructions that fit your operations equipment. Let's get started.
At Google, we're very passionate about impacting our food ecosystem, and the Menus of Change principles around healthy, sustainable menus have been a key resource. For example, we've concentrated on making our plant-based dishes stand out by focusing on factors such as flavor. We held a workshop on descriptive menu titles to entice Googlers to really make the healthiest choice. Another key principle has been leveraging plant-based strategies around global cuisine. We encourage our chefs from around the globe to share recipes and best practices to add to our repertoire.
Lentils are the plant protein tool that will help further your plant-forward menus. They are a key component to strategies looking to lower the environmental impact of food production. Lentils are a sustainable crop, fixing their own nitrogen into the soil and having a low water footprint. Cooking with lentils is the way to satisfy Millennial and Gen Z consumers' growing interest in healthy and craveable plant protein options, while also solving operational needs for cost-efficient and sustainable menu solutions. For more information, please visit lentils.org/foodservice.
The Mushroom Council is proud to be the founding corporate member of the Menus of Change R&D Collaborative. Named Ingredient of the Year for 2022 by the New York Times, mushrooms earn their rightful place on nutritious, delicious, and sustainable menus. In fact, mushrooms and The Blend meet at least 12 of the Menus of Change principles of healthy and sustainable menus. Always in season, mushrooms play a starring role in globally inspired plant-forward and plant-based dishes. They help cut salt as they deliver mouth-watering, umami-rich flavor. And when blended with ground meat, sustainably grown mushrooms add nutrition and flavor while reducing the impact on the planet. On behalf of the mushroom growers represented by the Mushroom Council, we thank you for your leadership and look forward to more nutritious, delicious, and sustainable menu innovation into the future.
Nature's Fine started as a research project for NASA. We discovered a new-to-the-world microorganism that has a unique ability to make protein. It's a microorganism that's very, very nutritionally dense with a lot of protein and all the essential protein that you need to build and maintain a healthy body. We can grow phi anywhere, anytime, using a fraction of the resources, a fraction of the water, a fraction of the energy, and emitting a fraction of the waste product that you would typically have from any other source of protein.
Here at Nestle Professional, our insights show there's a definite trend toward more plant-based menus. 50% of consumers are now ordering items featuring vegetables, and 38% of operators are adding vegetable-centric dishes. It's a trend we anticipated and were prepared for.
With the world's largest R&D networks, Nestle Professional is always ready to deliver inspiring food and beverage solutions. Our customers come to us because we are committed to enhancing quality of life and contributing to a healthier future.
My name is Doug Welsh, and I'm the roast master at Pete's Coffee. Fatima Ismail is the manager of the Sopexka Co-op. She also keyed into something really special with the women producers, that by forming an identity, the sisterhood, Las Hermanas, they could take special pride in the coffee they produced. We use Las Hermanas coffee in a fair trade blend of coffee that we call Los Cafeteros. Las Hermanas is not just about great coffee, but about women's empowerment.
Thank you so much to all of our sponsors for those insightful videos and for your ongoing support, especially during these last few years. As a reminder for our members, our sponsor contacts are included as a Google Sheet on the member portal for any collaborations you'd like to reach out to discuss. And now it's my pleasure to hand it over to Ghislaine Chalamel, Research Program Manager for R&D, Stanford Dining, and the MCURC. Ghislaine, over to you.
Hi. So I'm putting up my slides. Oops. Thank you so much, Shara. Et voilà. So thank you, Shara. I hope you are all comfortably seated, as our MCURC Research Showcase will require all your attention. But first, I'm glad to welcome Benita Gingerella, Editor of Food Service Director, who will facilitate the showcase. Benita, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much. Hi, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Benita Gingerella, and I am a Senior Editor for Food Service Director. I've been with the publication now for close to 6 years. And for those of you who may have never heard of us, we are a trade publication that covers the non-commercial food industry. So we cover college and university food service, of course, as well as healthcare food service, so the dining operations at senior living facilities and hospitals. And then we also cover K-12 food service, so the food service at school districts across the country. And so actually K-12 is what I cover extensively for Food Service Director. And so I'm really excited to have the opportunity to join you all this morning and get out of my typical coverage area and get a chance to hear a little bit about all of the cool and innovative things that are happening at the higher education level in terms of food service. And so as you can see on your screen, we have a pretty full schedule for you this morning. So how this is going to work is you will hear from each of our presenters, and then we have time for me to ask them one question, and then we are going to have to be moving right along to the next speaker. So I know you're trying to be cognizant of time, so is there anything, unless there's anything, Glenn, you want to add, I can go ahead and, all right, introduce our first speaker for the morning. All right, so our first speaker is Peggy Policastro, and she is the Director of Culinary Literacy and Nutrition for the New Jersey Healthy Kids Initiative, and she is also the Director of Nutrition Services at Rutgers University. And she's going to be speaking to us this morning about students' insights on menus of change principles. So please join me in welcoming Peggy.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. If you go to the first slide, please. Before we begin sharing the exciting research projects that are in our pipeline in MCURC, I wanted to provide you with an overview of the research working group. Some of this will be repeated what Sophie said this morning, but with some specific examples related to the research working group. And I hope you will see that there's a place for every member in MCURC to be involved in research, not just those with the research background, but every one of our members. We'd love to see you involved in our research projects. So first of all, the research working group includes academic members who bring their expertise in the research process to the group to assure that our findings are generalizable to the greater MCURC community and beyond. Next slide. One of our very integral and significant parts of our research working group are operators, as they share the practicality of implementing the methodology of our proposed studies in the dining halls, and they also provide input to ensure that our findings are applicable in real-world settings. As Sophie mentioned earlier, this is where MCURC is unique. We don't work in silos, in that we go right to the source when we're designing our research studies. Our operators are so indispensable in this aspect, as without them, we wouldn't have the practicality of if some of these studies would work in our real life settings. Next slide. And to finish off our trifecta of excellence, the research working group includes research collaborators. These folks are from around the world and from all parts of the food system and the food service chain, bringing their subject matter expertise. Next slide. So I know you probably have seen this research model before, but I think it's worth mentioning again, as it's pretty unique. And our behavioral research model involves bringing innovative research projects to scale, starting with one university. We usually start with one university and expand this to multiple universities across the MCURC network. Here you'll see an example of our recent Faith in Fat study that started at one university with around 200 participants and around 600 diner decisions. And this was later scaled to include 6 institutions, over 500 participants, and close to 1,600 diner decisions. Due to the power of this study, with a large amount of data points and excellent research methods and findings, this study, which to say has the greatest number of institutions included to date, was happily published in the journal Nutrients. Next slide. Many of our initial C studies are around or surround the MLC principles that Sophie shared earlier. And what we try to do with some of these C studies is to assess students' understanding of the individual principles and how we can enhance these principles to impact our students. If students don't understand what we're asking them to do in the principles, what good does it happen? Because if they can't follow because they don't understand what we're asking, that doesn't really secure our mission there. So next slide, please. As I previously mentioned, the Faith in Fat study is a wonderful example of this research model with its scalability and subsequent publication, as I mentioned, in the journal Nutrients. But another important piece of this research model includes a guide to address and implement the findings of the research in real-world settings. what good would research be if the findings stood on a shelf? And that sometimes happens when things get published in a journal. So an example of how these findings can be implemented can be found in executive summaries. And for the Faith and Fat, the executive summary will soon be available at, as Sophie mentioned before, the moccollaborative.org website. It's an open source for all of our tools, not just the executive summaries. Next slide. The research working group looks to democratize research, everyone to be involved, to be inclusive of all MCURC members, including our students, MCURC fellows. Our MCURC fellows often develop the initial research question around an MCURC principle. We feel that sometimes students know best what students know and what they don't know. Then, with the expertise of their mentor, the research process is defined and the pilot seed study is conducted. From there, the research process is shared with the research working group, which then allows faculty to adapt the study to their teaching environment. Next slide. A great example of this is with one of our newest members in taking the Around the World in 8 Plate study. A little bit of back history. This started at Rutgers and was actually the brainchild of a few of my fellow MCURC fellows. And one of the menu of change principles is celebrate cultural diversity. And we sought to answer, are students familiar with cultural foods from countries around the world? If they're not familiar with where foods are coming from, how can they celebrate diversity in these foods? So the original study included a booth in the dining hall as pictured, as pictured here, in which students who approached the booth were asked if they wanted to play a game about food. Students were then asked to match 6 foods to their country of origin. And as you can see, the foods and country of origin at the bottom of the picture. So we had a map, and then they would stick the foods on to where they thought they were from. And the answers were recorded and marked as correct or incorrect. And we went through the whole IRB process, etc. And we found that students are familiar with common cultural foods and country of origin for some more familiar items such as corn tortilla, bok choy, pierogies, hummus. However, items such as codfish, quinoa, and lentil stew caused a little problem for them, and these had the greatest percentage of incorrect answers. So next, back to how we involve Central Washington University. We presented the results of this study at one of our research working group monthly meetings, and representatives from Central Washington University thought this would be a great project as their capstone project for their master's students, who then make the research project their own by including questions on food literacy and dining out habits to see if they were, to assess if there were correlations between these 2 areas and correct and incorrect responses to foods and countries of origin. And CWU loved the idea and plans on collecting data this upcoming semester. So as you can see, pilot studies around MOC principles can be scaled, as we mentioned in the Faith and Fat study, as to include multiple universities, or they can follow the research question or idea and then use it and augment it by one university to fit their needs. Next slide. So here's a pipeline of some of our other MOC-centered projects we plan on implementing, all with the goal of democratizing research, bridging research and education, and empowering our student fellows. And I would like to thank you very much for tuning in today to hear about what we're doing. Again, these are some of our studies: choosing healthier oils, good fat, no fat, drink healthy, reduce sugar, what's a portion. And for any of these studies, they're basically a plug and play. We have everything set up. I can share the IRB approvals, so you can present them at your own university and adapt them to how you see fit. And or we can do a study in which we roll it out to multiple universities. And once again, we'd like to democratize research to get everyone involved, not just researchers or academics, but also our operators or anyone that is involved in MCURC. Thank you again.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Peggy. And so I do have one question for you. And I was hoping you could share any best practices that you have learned from conducting the Around the World in 8 Plate study that you'll apply to future MOC student-driven research projects.
Sure. I love the idea that students come with a research idea. But I think one thing we always have to keep in mind is that we have to have an idea that we can measure. And so the question has to be a measurable question. So in Around the World in 8 Plates, what we measured were the amount of correct or incorrect answers. Therefore, we can do statistical analysis on them. But if something can't be measured, we can't really study it. So for best practices, I would say if we're working with our students in developing some of these research questions, we really need to make sure that it's something that can be measured. So they may have an idea and a question, which is wonderful, but I think as their mentors, we have to bring them in and to make sure that they follow the research process and to be able to measure what they're doing. The other best practice I would say is take one of these plug and play type of options and think about how you might want to make it your own. Looking at the 8 plates around the world, we might see very different answers regionally, because in different regions of the country, students may be more familiar with different types of ethnic foods. So you may change the foods that are there to match how it would fit your region of the country. So these are there as a springboard for you to start with, as far as saying, yeah, I would like to include more universities, make this my own. But if you're thinking of your own research question, again, going back to best practices, make sure it is something that can be assessed and can be measured.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. That was so informative. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker. So Dr. Nell Putna-Farr is an assistant professor of marketing at the Jones Graduate School of Business at Rice University. And she will be speaking to us this morning about her Food for Climate labeling study.
Great, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to talk to you today about some work that we've been thinking about and prepping to launch for a while. So with that, maybe first slide, thanks. So I want to highlight that this has been such a great team effort from the very beginning. We've pilot tested this protocol already with a number of partners, and it really feels like the perfect example of what Sophie was mentioning about collaboration within the MCURC between multiple academic research collaborators and a great group of dining service operators with very different types of operations. So this is about theory and science-driven ideas tested across a wide variety of sites so we can maximize our knowledge. And I want to thank all of these great organizations that have been involved in this planning and pilot test. So what and why are we trying to explore here? We're all interested in the impact of food on our climate and resources, and we have the strong sense that a lot of the students are as well. Many of them have expressed interest in the climate impact of food. They say it's important, they say it's something they care about, but we want to understand if they actually make decisions based on that information. For example, we know that healthiness is important to them as well, but labeling something as healthy may actually deter people from choosing the item. So how do they think about climate labeling really with respect to the choices that they're making about food? Next, yep. So at its heart, what we really want to know is this. Does a climate-friendlier dish label coupled with explanation material increase the selection of the dish by students and reduce the selection of a comparable meat dish? And we want to be clear that this is a very specific and relatively narrow question. We just want to examine whether this label impacts selection. There's no social media where you might have amplification effects or social pressure. This isn't necessarily part of a larger environmental campaign. This is the simplest possible form of messaging to implement, and we want to know if it'll have any effect. But in order to know that, we also have to understand some of the key elements that make up that climate-friendly label. So one thing that we've learned as part of this pre-testing process is that we need some supporting information, hence that part of the research question, or else people are very skeptical of these labels. But we also want to know what exactly makes for a good climate-friendly label, one that can be easily used across multiple institutions. Where in the process should it be placed? And does it matter what kind of dish you're featuring? So we're going to discuss some of these side questions individually because ultimately they're a big part of determining how we attack this research question. But before I do that, let me just quickly give you all the definition we're using for climate friendly. It's basically pescatarian with limited dairy. We wanted to make sure we were using a consistent and relatively conservative definition of climate friendly so that everyone could agree that it would meet their own definitions and not present any conflict with the environmental work that you're doing on campuses already. So what label works best? We've actually pre-tested a bunch of the ones that you see here. We did these online with hypothetical choices. We wanted to add the feet as a more attention-getting label, and the Delish Dish to put the focus on flavor. And between the plain planet and the climate friendly, we wanted to know if adding words was necessary. So we asked people to choose between a beef stir fry and a tofu stir fry as a hypothetical choice online, and measured the share of the tofu without a label compared to with each of these labels. So without a label, about 24% of people chose tofu, and the only label that did meaningfully better was the one you see here, the climate friendly planet. And to confirm that this is also true with the populations that are most relevant to our partners, we also break out the results for people aged 18 to 24 or female, and this is the best label for those groups as well. Some of you are probably asking yourselves why, and we think this is because it's the right combination of credible and simple without making you speculate about other attributes that might be going on. Another important aspect of the label is understanding where it should be placed. We discovered in our online pretest that there's a healthy amount of skepticism about climate-friendly labels. So we wanted people to have clear information about what went into the label, and we ideally wanted them to get this information before they're at the point of making a decision. Since once you've arrived at the station and are placing your order, it's really too late to influence people's choices. So we also decided to test some informational posters to see which one resonated the most with potential diners. So we created this sort of generic message about what's a carbon footprint, climate-friendly diet, gave them some information about the food-related emissions that go with diet. So we tested just this generic message before the menu. We tested it with a very basic climate-friendly logo that we showed you before. And then we also looked at how people made decisions with really a dish highlight that gives a more in-depth description of the dish, sort of a luscious description, I guess I would say. So in what should come as no surprise, the informational poster followed by the label that makes the dish seem attractive is the one that we saw perform the best in our online test. So I'll show you here then an example of what we showed at Stanford in the pilot. Basic information in the poster, along with this label and what I'm calling the luscious description, the one that makes you want to try it, the tastiest vegetable pot pie. So for the last of the questions that I showed you at the beginning, let's discuss the type of dish. This is certainly something that's ongoing that we're still trying to figure out. These are some examples of the types of dishes we saw used in the pilot. And as you can see, there's a wide variety. In addition to obvious differences like warm or cold and caloric equivalents, one of the things we're realizing may be important is the familiarity that people already have with the dish. So if we're labeling something that they see every day at a stir fry station, they might not even pay attention to the label. Whereas something that's a novel addition to a cycle menu might demand more attention as they look to understand ingredients or preparation. So we're still trying to understand this piece a little more and plan to have more guidance for this by the time we ask participants to run this as a full project. Finally, I want to talk briefly about measurement. This isn't specifically about climate labeling, but it's been one of the really interesting and useful aspects of running this as a pilot before we run a full study. So our measurement goal is to see if this ratio at the bottom changes. The number of servings of the focal dish as a ratio of the total number of participants. So basically, we're changing the proportion of people who take this dish by adding the climate-friendly label. That's the goal. And it's important to look at it as a ratio because when we do that, the power for our statistical calculations actually comes from the denominator, the number of participants, and it allows us to test with fewer number of days. But measuring the numerator can be challenging. In an ideal world, we'd have the same unit of measurement for top and bottom, so the ratio of people who took the dish out of everyone who came through. But measuring how many people took the dish is burdensome unless you have a point of sale system. And so for our pilot, we compared these different ways of measuring to look at the correlations. Several of the participating universities used 2 different measurement techniques. And the good news is that the correlations are very high, leaving us confident that we can choose or use whichever of these is easiest for each location. I expect that most participating institutions will use the PANS method, which allows us to estimate the number of servings based on the number and weight of the pan served minus the leftovers. And our hope is that this will make participation easier for everyone involved. So that's where we are today. We've pilot tested this methodology and we're in the process of refining it. Specifically, we're trying to identify what types of dishes and what specific messaging will be most effective. But for anyone interested in participating, this is the ask. We'd like you to be able to collect these data listed here on the left, and you'll note that we've listed number of servings so we can have some flexibility in how you do that. And we'd like you to be able to run it during a baseline period and an intervention of at least two, in an intervention at least 2 locations. Ideally, those would be 2 different dining facilities, but we think this could also be done as 2 separate stations within the same facility. And with that, I will happily take a question.
All right, great. Thank you so much. And so my question for you is, I noticed in your presentation, the descriptions of the dishes that you showed used vivid words such as flaky, hearty, etc. And I think you mentioned this very briefly in your presentation, but is there anything in regard to word choice that operators should be paying attention to when they are writing these labels and explanation materials?
Definitely. And this is a great example of how we want to use these research initiatives to build on what's happened before. And so we know from the past work that's been done that the description makes a big difference. There's some research that I've been involved with. There's some research that Google's been doing, that the descriptions make a big difference in terms of how people think about that choice. And you have to make it appealing. And so we want to maximize the effectiveness. We have to make sure that we're giving them an option that really is a good choice for them to have. And the descriptions make a big difference in that area. And not least of which is the fact that if we don't have a good description, people aren't really going to pay any attention to the label anyway. And so if we want them to see the climate-friendly label, we have to make sure that it's a good and compelling description, as well as a compelling logo and everything else.
All right, great. Thank you so much. All right, and so next up, we have Samantha LeBeau, who is the Sustainability Coordinator at the University of California, Berkeley, and she will be speaking to us today about Berkeley's Carbon Labels on Menus study.
Great, thank you so much. I was really especially excited to share this project with you all, as it was really made possible by MCURC. I was actually inspired to start the project after I had a conversation with Alex from the University of Michigan, who kind of helped me realize that this was possible. And then I got to work with former MCURC fellow Alejandra Marquez, now at UT Austin, who you'll hear from tomorrow, who did the research on whether these labels changed how we saw students select their food. And of course, we continue to learn more about our program and our messaging as Nell and the other campuses conduct their study. Next slide. So just logistically, we kind of created a carbon calculator out of our menu management system. So we used eTech, which is our menu management system, and we edited one of the nutrition fields to be carbon emissions. I know it's small, but I tried to put arrows at what I'm trying to get you to see. So we used the same data set that was utilized by the Cool Food Pledge calculator and put each of those factors as a nutritional. So now when you pull up the nutrition in eTech, you can see an example of, or an estimate of how many carbon emissions came out of each recipe. And so the example I pulled was the cheeseburger, and 96% of the emissions are coming from the beef patty, which is what we would expect. Next slide. We assigned thresholds for low, medium, and high emissions and used a stoplight colored system. And we designed a CO2 cloud as the label. This data was integrated into our online menu, and customers can click on each of the recipes online to see the breakdown. So I pulled up an example of the beef cheeseburger versus our vegetarian Malibu burger, and you can see that the vegetarian burger has significantly lower emissions than the beef cheeseburger. Our chefs use our online menu to add the labels physically to the cafeteria menus. And so I pulled up an example of that. And you can see, you know, for the grill platform, for example, there's a variety of colors and students can choose what matches what they're trying to do with the environment. Next. And so as we were implementing these labels, we had the opportunity to first serve a whole cycle without the labels on the menu, and then put the labels on the menu and study the different service records to see if the results were different. So the column I want you to look at is the percentage points difference. And very interestingly enough, after the analysis, we showed that there was a shift between away from both the red and green labeled items and towards the yellow labeled items. Alejandra is conducting further analysis and seeing if we saw direct substitutions between the green labeled items and the red or yellow labeled items. And so the graphs above show that during the experimental period, in most cases, students gravitated towards the plant-based items, with the exception of the vegan tenders and the marinara pasta. So all the green in that one graph is the percentage points increase towards the plant-based options versus the animal-based options. We are doing further analysis on this, which I'm hoping Alejandra and I will be able to share about whether we're seeing this at each of the platforms. Our results overall, because we saw such a decrease in the red labeled items, Alejandra concluded that we did see an overall reduction of emissions between the baseline and experimental period. And the graph above the gray is the total, the gray lines are the total between all of the labeled items. And so you can see that there was a difference between the baseline and experimental period of how many carbon emissions that were created through our procurement during this time. And I left up some contact information for me and Alejandra. We're both happy to answer any questions you have about this. And if you're interested in starting something similar, please reach out because I've made all the mistakes for you. And so I'm happy to share what we've learned through the process. And happy to take your question.
All right, thank you so much. So my question for you is, you mentioned that one of the next steps is to conduct future research, analysis on if the shift was recognized equally across the different platforms. So can you share some more background on how you're going to be approaching that and setting that up?
Yeah, so all of our chefs collect service records in eTech. And so the first time Alejandra did this analysis, we piled everything that we served into one document and passed that along to her. And what she's working on now is identifying what was served at each platform, seeing if there was indeed a green labeled item next to a yellow or red labeled item, and seeing if more students chose that green labeled item at each platform. So we're just doing it in a little bit more detail to make sure that we were offering direct substitutions when they were available.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so next up, we have Dr. Becky Ramsing and Ken Cheng from Johns Hopkins University. And they are going to be speaking to us about strategies for reducing meat consumption in college and university settings.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, hopefully Ken will come on as well. Okay, great. really nice to be here with you. Just a clarification, I am not a doctor. I have had practiced many years as a dietitian and public health professional, and now I'm really applying what my knowledge and skills and expertise into academics and research and communication. So it's really been a great combination and marriage of interest at working at the Center for a Livable Future, where we research and we work at the intersection of food systems and public health. As part of our program, Ken, who's going to spend more time with you today, joined us when he was a Master's of Science in Public Health student at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, and as a research assistant, and really kind of became part of our CLF family very quickly. Was active in a lot of research even after he graduated, and now he is awaiting his entrance into the PhD program at Cornell University. So we're really excited to have him in the work just to show the work he's been working on with us on looking at what really works. We've looked at literature reviews about meat reduction in different settings, and we've been following that, but we really wanted to get down to look at the studies that have been published and find some themes. And so I'm really excited about the presentation. So go ahead, Ken.
Great. So yeah, thank you, Becky, for that generous introduction. So as Becky had mentioned, I worked at the Center for a Livable Future on a variety of projects related to meat reduction, this systematic review being one of them. So we've been hard at work at this project for quite some time now, so I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to share some of these preliminary findings with you all as we wrap things up for publication. We can move to the next slide. So this first slide provides us with a flowchart that illustrates our progression through the search strategy we designed alongside Lori Roseman, the lead informationist at the Welch Medical Library, who's been a great help to us in this project. All told, we consulted 7 academic research databases for the systematic review, which yielded an initial total of 13,607 results. And after going through the very tedious exercise of screening these records, first on the basis of their titles and abstracts, and then later on their full text contents, we ultimately ended up with a total of 31 unique interventions that we were able to include within our analysis. Next slide. So this line graph was used to temporarily place these 31 interventions and provide us with an understanding of how this subset of the meat reduction literature has progressed over time. And we were specifically interested in tracking when these interventions were conducted and when they were published. And as you can deduce by the slopes of the lines around the years 2010 and 2015, there's been a proliferation in the implementation and documentation of these kinds of interventions over time, which is encouraging to see. So in our systematic review, we distinguished between the success and the effectiveness of these meat reduction strategies, whereby the former was operationalized as the abilities of these strategies to achieve significant reductions in meat consumption in binary, and the latter looked at the magnitude of these observed effects. So the dot plot illustrated here gives us a sense of how effective the 31 interventions included within our analyses were at achieving these desired outcomes. And you can see there's a bit of a range across the x-axis. We can move to the next slide. So this is probably the last figure we'll be sharing with you today, and it's a forest plot derived from our fixed effect model, which we use to compare the relative effectiveness of a smaller subset of interventions, specifically the ones that investigated observed changes in meat consumption over time. We decided to go with a fixed effect model rather than a random effect model for our meta-analysis because of the anticipated heterogeneity across the 3 types of outcome variables that we included within our analyses. So more specifically, we were a bit concerned about the potential asymmetries that could exist between reports that used, for example, individuals' intentions to change their behaviors and their observed actions as they were derived from purchasing data. So with this narrower set of interventions, we marked each example with a color signifying its membership within one of 3 general approach categories, the first of which are interventions that target conscious decision-making processes. So this is typically through the use of pricing incentives and information-based strategies, and interventions that target aspects of the built environment. So this is typically by altering the choice architecture of the retail space. And then lastly, interventions that target both. So as you can see by the vertical lines depicting the mean effect size associated with each of these categories, these multimodal interventions that target both of these aspects were associated with higher average effect sizes than the remaining 2 categories. So this basically leads us to the 2 largest takeaways that we had from the systematic review, the first of which is that interventions that consciously incentivize individuals to make healthier and more sustainable food choices, while also taking the steps to alter the built environment in ways that accommodated these choices, were associated with greater reductions in meat consumptions within these settings than interventions that relied on just one strategy alone. But I guess it's important to note that just because this strategy was favorable in this one type of setting does not necessarily dictate that they will translate easily to other types of contextual environments. So more research is going to be required to fully understand the ins and outs of these contextual influences on the effectiveness of meat reduction interventions. But I guess that being said, the systematic review does provide some favorable evidence in support of settings-based approaches to meat reduction, and I guess their potential role in helping governments, organizations, and civil society facilitate the kinds of dietary changes necessary to achieve sustainability targets.
Okay, great. Thank you both. So my question, either one of you feel free to jump in and answer, but for operators who are, maybe just starting out and can't immediately jump into a multi-pronged approach or a multi-intervention strategy that you mentioned to reduce meat consumption on campus, based on your research, do you have any suggestions on like what intervention they could start with, like where they could begin? Is there anything they could, focus on first?
Ken, I'll let you go.
Okay. So as Becky pointed out to me, when we estimated the effect sizes for a lot of these interventions, it's worth noting that the vast majority of them were associated with positive effects, meaning they were able to lead to some type of positive change in the right direction when it comes to meat consumption. I think it was like maybe over 2/3 were able to achieve significant reductions in meat consumption. So that being said, a lot of the strategies that we analyze can generate positive effects. So I guess whatever is going to be easily implementable, and then I guess it's intuitively it's good to lead with information-based approaches. So individuals have a better understanding about the potential consequences of their food choices. And the other types of interventions that potentially rely on altering the built environment can always come later. You can always create that sort of more accommodating environment after the fact, once the people living and operating with that environment are understanding about the ways in which their food choices can impact the health of the planet. Yeah.
Great. All right, thank you. So next up, we are going to have Christopher Gardner from Stanford, who will be speaking to us this morning about his swap meat study.
Hey gang, nice to see you. Okay, so we're going to build off the swap meat study that Anthony Cromarco led a while back, our cool new research manager. We had 2 phases in that, a meat phase and a plant phase, where we got 40 people to switch for 8 weeks each, and we gave them Beyond Meat products. Oh, there we go. And real meat products. And we used a really nice delivery group in San Francisco to do the real meat products. So we had quality real meat and Beyond Meat. And in that particular study, without going into any detail, we had 3 benefits. A cardiovascular risk factor went down in the plant meat versus animal. They lost a little weight and their LDL cholesterol got better. So this is a cardiovascular study. A lot of things didn't change, but anything that changed favored the alternative meat. So we decided to do one in students with performance outcomes, which I think has great implications for our MCURC. So this is going to have to be really fast because it's only 5 minutes, right? 24 participants in random order not only did plant meat and animal meat, but we added a vegan option. So we had 3 different diets, okay? So that was the new part. It was 4 weeks each. Probably should be longer than that, but we can get into that maybe another time. We collected a lot of data beforehand, a lot of data afterhand. They were instructed to follow their normal regimen. The group that we invited were runners and weightlifters, 12 of each. This is beautifully balanced. There were 6 women and 6 men in each one. There's sort of 6 different orders you can do 3 things in. So we actually had 4 people do each one of the 6 different orders. And each of the 4 people meant 1 runner man, 1 runner woman, 1 resistance trainer man, 1 resistance trainer woman. It was all kind of very elegantly balanced. And then the runners would have to do a 12-minute run, a timed run at the end and see their distance. And the weightlifters would have to use a bunch of machines and lift weights. They had to lift all the time, run all the time. They had to have run for at least 2 years or lifted for at least 2 years before the study started, so that they were regular runners and lifters. And so 22 of the 24 finished everything. And the whole objective was to see if athletic performance, not cardiovascular disease, would benefit here. So we know that plant-based diets are better for cardiovascular and the environment, but is there some resistance among performance folks? So we asked them to eat 2 servings a day of each of these 3 things for 4 weeks each. And look how well they did getting close to 2 servings a day or 14 servings a week. Very similar there. So quickly, what happened to the runners? There were no differences between the animal and plant-based. And what happened to the lifters? It was a composite measure of 3 different machine lifting type exercises. No differences. So in the results that our master's student is writing up right now, she was looking at percent change from baseline. So these numbers are percent change. So the runners ran a little faster during all 3 phases compared to baseline. The lifters, I think they were inspired to be in this study, lifted a little more after the baseline, but pretty similar between them. So this is animal versus vegan, animal versus plant-based. And the idea here is it's less than 1% difference than comparing the 2. And it's about 1 to 3% difference here. Does that make sense? Okay, so not much difference. So in conclusion, the participants got more protein on the animal meat phase, more in animal than plant-based meat alternatives, more than vegan. But on all 3 diets, they're getting enough to support their protein needs. And so more than enough is not additionally beneficial. By switching to a more plant-based diet, you can maintain your athletic performance while promoting cardiovascular and environmental health. These are the rock stars that did this. And I'd like to propose this as a Menus of Change project that we could do across universities. Thanks.
All right, great. And so I have one question for you. I was curious, did you find that any of the students decided to continue a plant-based diet, or at the very least increase the amount of plant-based meals in their diet after the study finished and they found out their performance was still the same?
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing was it was different for the runners and the weightlifters. So the runners actually, I think, they actually lost just a little bit of weight, like a pound. And the runners thought, oh, cool, I'm leaner and faster and I can do this. I think the weightlifters still have it in their mind that they need to be huge and they need their protein and they're a little more skeptical. So this is sort of one approach does not fit all. We should sort of get into the psyche of the weightlifters. And the other thing that we found out was we probably shouldn't assign 2 servings of plant-based meat alternatives a day. There's not many options for that. And the students were getting bored. I think if we do this again, we should do animal, we should do vegan, and we should do vegan with the option to add some plant-based meats sometimes, but not be forced to eat it twice a day. Happy to work on that kind of design with other MCURC folks. Thanks for the opportunity to share our research.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. So next up, we're going to be hearing from Dr. Nana Meyer from the University of Colorado Boulder, and she is going to be speaking to us about her food literacy to citizenship study.
Thank you very much. You can go to the first slide. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting me. And I am from the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, UCCS, and not Boulder. This study was published in 2021, and it is the study on food next door, from food literacy to citizenship on a college campus. As part of our Healthy Campus initiative, we call Sustainability, Wellness, and Learning, or SWEL. We developed a student-run local and sustainable food establishment called Food Next Door. This intrinsic case study was based on diffusion of innovation and used a mixed model design. Although the bulk of our data came from qualitative sources with interviews, recipe books, white papers, observations, awards that Food Next Door won, and annual reports over the years. Next slide. In year 1, we collected pilot data to build the case for Food Next Door. We used a validated and reliable food literacy survey in health sciences students and faculty and staff, and really found that most had pretty poor food literacy. And that built our case. During the pilot year, we studied food literacy scores in association with an early version of Food Next Door, which was also called our Veggie Bowl initiative. Food literacy scores were associated with purchasing these bowls, and there was an increase in sales when food literacy initiatives were paired with the Veggie Bowl offerings. Next slide. In year 2 and 3, we assessed the Food Next Door experiences in customers first, who frequently ate at Food Next Door, volunteers second, who consistently helped with Food Next Door's meal preparation, and then the lead students who were graduate assistants in SWEL. We conducted interviews and qualitatively analyzed them through the identification of themes and sub-themes. These were then triangulated with other data sources to build a summary or generalization of the Food Next Door experience. Next slide. Food Next Door is a weekly cyclic endeavor which starts with menu planning, typically on Friday, local food procurement that is autonomous for the students, food literacy development aligned with the menu, and volunteer coordination, followed by harvest from our campus farm, and food preparation with volunteers to service in retail and residential dining operations. And then, of course, it was all paired with food literacy education through the leads and volunteers. Next slide. The results here are best illustrated in these word clouds, which show the progression from food literacy to food citizenship from customers to volunteers and leads, and specifically demonstrating that food literacy must be built first before individuals begin to transform into food citizens. This is often called critical food literacy as well. Interview themes and customers related to the fresh and flavorful food, smiling and supporting staff, and personal food transformation. Volunteer themes, and these were all nutrition undergraduate students helping in the kitchen, highlighted greater awareness of new foods and plant-based approaches, cooking skills and connection to food and to each other. Lead themes focused on leadership, peer teaching and learning, and food systems knowledge and advocacy. Through this case studies inductive process, pathways from food literacy to citizenship emerged. Experiencing and becoming part of the food value chain through Food Next Door built food literacy, shifted values in students, and transformed participants into food citizens. Next slide, please. And this is sort of the end of this presentation because COVID-19 derailed Food Next Door and Swell. But we were able to pivot very quickly, and basically we're launching a project that was very much related to Food Next Door with its philosophy in food value chains, and helped students to continue to participate in the food value chain. So thanks a lot for letting me present it.
All right, thank you so much. And so my question for you, and I know you just mentioned that COVID has kind of really thrown a wrench in this program, but do you have any tips for operators who may be looking to set up a similar program as Food Next Door at their school, especially given the current climate that we're in?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I think first is the innovative inclusion of alternative food systems. And these are value chains, and they do live right next to and parallel to supply chains that may also be sustainable. The value chains just provide an opportunity for students to get involved more personally, and that allows them to transform. And for a university, I think it's also interesting because it can promote the Sustainable Development Goals, and it can also support equity, diversity, and inclusion in terms of procurement diversity from, you know, a portfolio of farmers and growers. The other thing is the academic connection that we had, especially through Swell, with funding supported through student success, as well as dining services of the students particularly. And they're still being funded now as Swell students. The collaboration across kitchens, you know, this also takes some time because Food Next Door was elaborate. There was also always big buckets of fresh produce, lots of dirt coming in from local farms. And so there needs to be a certain collaboration, and also building those farming relationships in the local region. That builds, you know, a kind of a participatory opportunity for the university itself, and brings students closer to the soil and just their food system. And then finally, you know, campus infrastructure. We have a farm on campus, a small farm that just complemented the food procured through local farms and the value chains around us.
All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And our final speaker today is Dr. Jennifer Jay from the University of California, Los Angeles, and she is going to be speaking to us this morning about her study on environmental benefits of a default veg approach to catering events on a college campus.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm excited to be here to talk about what's been a really great collaborative project between the partners that you see here. Too many names to mention, but I did want to give a special shout out to Ilana Braverman, Angela Zhang, Renata Bornowski, and Mei Wang for actually generating the slide deck, and to Ghislaine also for helping with the slides. Next slide. So the basic idea is that while we know diet shifts need to happen, food choice is really complicated, and more research is needed to figure out how to actually make this shift. And so default bias is a known human phenomenon that says that we tend to opt for a default choice that has already been given to us. So this can be leveraged to promote healthy and sustainable habits. Next slide. It was shown for food at a study by Hansen et al. In Denmark at a conference where half of the attendees were told they were receiving a meat-containing buffet and that they could opt in for a vegetarian option. So those are the bars on the left, most people sticking with the meat default. When the default was changed to a vegetarian default, almost everybody stayed with the vegetarian buffet default. So that was the background literature. Next slide. So this brings us to our 3 different events that we've conducted and also analyzed the environmental benefits for in the US. Next slide. So here's the wording. We switched it from a buffet, since that's not always practical, to just a single meal. So half of the attendees were informed that they would be getting a meat-containing meal, and the option to stay with that meal was pre-checked. So on a Google form, they had to switch the check mark to the plant-based meal, and the other experimental group had the opposite. They were told it would be a plant-based meal and they would have to switch. Next slide, please. So you can see some results here. We basically did get a big difference in the people choosing plant-based meals. That would be the blue bar. So just looking in depth at, say, the first set of bars, you can see at the Civil and Environmental Engineering department, when there was a meat default, that's on the left, the very leftmost, almost everybody did stick. We had 14% choosing the vegetarian or plant-based. And then when it was the default, it was much higher, 43 percentage points difference. And kind of we saw similar results at the other 2 studies. So next slide, we took kind of that average and calculated the environmental benefits of different 100-person model events. And in terms of carbon footprint, blue water, land use, nitrogen, and phosphorus, we compared it to the planetary boundaries per capita boundary for these parameters. Next slide. So this would be the carbon footprint, only shown here in the bars, for a 100-person event. And the top 4 bars show the carbon footprint if you just serve everybody the same sandwich. So you can see the vegan burrito coming in under that green line. That green line is the planetary boundary per capita per meal multiplied by 100. So you see you come in under it, vegetarian and chicken being next, and then a cheeseburger model tier, but be similar for a roast beef sandwich, is way over. And then the next bars show the modeled carbon footprint for extrapolating our results to different scenarios, with the middle bars being a default of meat and either chicken or beef, and then the bottom 4 being the default veg. So it's a little complicated, but you can see the only bar of the bottom 8 to come anywhere close to the boundary would be the plant-based default, with a chicken option for the people who will choose to go to meat. Okay, next slide. We have a bunch of ongoing really cool research questions. We want to dig into the group demographics. We want to play with RSVP, the form wording choice. We want to tell people, for sustainability reasons, we're doing this default, see how that changes things. And also repeat events, for example. And then next slide, we also have an upcoming study to look more at the implementation science. And I'm at 5 minutes, so I'll take a question.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yep.
Okay.
So just a little bit at the end there, you talked a little bit about, kind of identifying barriers to implementing the default veg approach, and that's kind of some future research that you're going to be tackling. But I was curious, when you were completing this study at Harvard and UCLA, were there any potential barriers or challenges that you were kind of already able to identify a little bit?
Sure. So I wanted to point out that Professor Mei Wang will be the one leading that implementation work. It's really important because even the best interventions are just really hard to replicate. So we are excited to dig into the details of it. But 2 things, in one department, we were competing with the previous year, which was the cheapest pizza they could find. So it's hard to beat the price of cheap pizza. And so we needed a grant from Default Veg to make that happen. And now that we fed better quality food one year, we're hoping that will continue. So costs could be, but also we just need advocates at this point. You're asking people to change what they did the year before. And so the people making decisions need to know that it's supported by the students, by faculty, administrators, anybody who would be attending the event or have a stake can say, oh, I heard about this approach. And it really just needs multiple people. No one wants to make the decision on their own to change the meal for everyone.
All right, wonderful, thank you. All right, so that is the end of our presentations this morning. Elaine, I will turn it over to you for a final farewell, I think.
Yeah, thank you so much, Benita, and that was really fantastic. Thanks to all our speakers, and as many of you already know, that was my last research showcase. So I would like to take the opportunity to thank Dr. Everett, Eric, Sophie, Jackie, and Peggy, and all the members of the research working group. I am so proud and honored to have worked with you all. The MCURC is not only about food, it's also about community and pleasure and making the world a better place. I'm leaving this role, but remain a member of this great family, and really hope our path will cross again. I have worked for the past 2 months with Anthony Crimarco, MCURC's new research program manager, as Christopher kind of sold it before the announcement, and as many of you know. And I'm so thrilled to have such a talented successor to support MCURC working group. Welcome, Anthony, and I'll pass it to Eric, right?
Yes, thank you, Elaine, and thank you so much for all of your wonderful work. You have made an incredible difference in the MCURC. And we are so grateful for all of your contributions and looking forward to your next steps transitioning to an MCURC alum. So I know there's more still to come, many more great things. But I do want to say good morning and a warm welcome to all. I've been in student COVID care meetings all morning, and unfortunately was unable to welcome you along with Sophie at the start of today's meeting. However, it's great to be here now, and on behalf of Dr. Shirley Everett, our Senior Associate Vice Provost here at Stanford, thank you so much for joining us today in the 7th Annual MCURC meeting. A quick update on Stanford, and I certainly won't go into all the current challenges, but let me say, little did we know that we would be delivering thousands of meals across this very large campus since the start of the year, and now also delivering rapid test kits to students in isolation and quarantine. We've seen some of the highest positive case counts since the start of the year with our students and staff who've been on campus since the start of winter quarter. So far, since the start of 2022, we have prepared and delivered over 6,000 meals to students in isolation and quarantine. I'm sure those universities on the quarter system have probably had similar challenges as we have at Stanford. But most of all, I want to say thank you very much to all of our exceptional MCURC members for taking your valuable time to present today and tomorrow. The research presentations that I was able to see so far have just looked exceptional and insightful. I am full of gratitude for your terrific work and look forward to the rest of today's and tomorrow's presentations. Thank you all very much, and I will turn it back to Elaine.
It will be to Jackie.
Okay, to Jackie. Take it away,
Thank
Jackie.
you, Eric. So glad you were able to join us. All right, I am going to quickly share my screen. All right, so I would like to begin also by just sharing my thanks to Elaine and also on behalf of MCURC and Eric and Sophie for all of her contributions over these past few years. It has really been just a pleasure working with Elaine. So thank you very, very much. And we wish you all the best in your next adventure in Boston. I know that you're in good company there with all of our collaborators in that area. So thank you so much, Elaine. We really, really appreciate all of your tremendous contributions. We're also very excited, as both Christopher and Ghislaine mentioned, to welcome our new research program manager, Anthony Cromarco. So I've been queued up perfectly by Christopher in sharing that Anthony comes to us actually from Christopher's team at the Stanford Prevention Research Center Nutrition Studies Research Group, where he was a postdoc. And he was lead author of the Stanford University swap meat study, which, as you're well aware now, looked at the health effects of replacing red meat with plant-based meat alternatives. Anthony has his PhD from the University of South Carolina, where he worked very much in the food space, developing an intervention to help promote more plant-based foods to African-American adults by partnering with vegan soul food chefs. So Anthony has tremendous experience, tremendous talents, and we're very, very excited to welcome him to the team supporting R&D Stanford Dining as well as the MCURC. So welcome, Anthony. All right, so then I'm going to transition to an update on the MCURC Collective Impact Initiative, which for those of you who are not yet familiar is a collective initiative to help shift our institutional protein purchases in order to scale climate smart food solutions. And so a quick synopsis of this initiative it's really focused on data collection and impact analysis with the intention of empowering our members by helping them understand, and us collectively as the MCURC, understand our institution's protein portfolios and how collectively the food that we purchase and our collective buying power can impact the environmental, the health and environmental effects of our food programs. And so our goals in this collective impact initiative are to, one, be able to understand the scale of the health and environmental impact of our collective purchases, to establish metrics and collective targets to measure that impact, to test, iterate, and share solutions to accelerate progress, and to create annual reports and case studies to highlight successful strategies across member institutions. So I really see this as a way to measure the impact of all the incredible work that's going on throughout the MCURC, from the work going on in the research working group to the education and systems innovation working group. And all of these incredible initiatives are being implemented across MCURC campuses in the US and now abroad as well. This is a way to measure that impact and create some metrics that we can track, and the ability to set targets so that we can move in the direction that we all are aiming to. So a quick history and timeline. This initiative began back in 2017 with a pilot of 3 indicators with 7 universities, and look at us now. Pre-COVID, we had just collected 100 million pounds of food from 26 institutions. And despite all of the challenges that our member institutions have experienced with COVID, we still had, for 2020, 20 institutions participate. And this is a completely voluntary initiative. So these institutions are participating because they care deeply about the environmental and health impact of their food purchases, and they see value in the ability to work together and collaboratively towards these goals. And so we're going to continue to borrow terms from Eric, to catapult out of COVID. And as we work towards our new normal, we want to make sure that we're thinking about the impacts that our food programs, that these research projects and best practices that we're developing have on our food purchases. And so to just share the data from 2020, as I mentioned, we collected data on 33 million pounds of food across 20 institutions. And I apologize if it's a little difficult to see the distribution here of the different foods, but you'll see here, as is consistent with previous data we've collected, that the contributions of food-related emissions is most significant for our ruminant meat, so for beef and lamb, which make up a relatively small proportion of the total food purchases when you look at it by weight, about 11.6%, but account for almost 70% of our food-related emissions. So looking at this 2020 data, we can see that there were some impacts of the pandemic. Well, one is that we had a huge overall reduction in our food-related emissions, but the caveat there is that this was due to significantly reduced operations across the MCURC. So it's actually quite convenient that prior to the pandemic, we had also incorporated an intensity metric to be able to monitor the intensity of food-related emissions of our food purchases, regardless of the amount of food that we were purchasing. And so this was intended to allow institutions whose food programs were growing to see kind of their progress overall and not be penalized for the fact that they were serving more foods. But what we found in the pandemic is actually it was quite useful for continuing to measure, to have a consistent metric to measure progress, even despite the significant reduction in the amount of food that we were serving. And so what we see here was that there was a small increase, about 2% in the pounds of carbon dioxide equivalents per pound of food that we purchased. But I think all of us can agree that with all of the challenges that COVID has brought upon the food industry and food service providers, from supply chain disruptions to staffing shortages and changing consumer preferences, which all of our members have cited as challenges they've experienced, we see this as actually quite reassuring that despite these challenges, the relative intensity of our food-related emissions did not substantially increase. So we have been able to essentially maintain the progress that we've made thus far, and we are well positioned to continue to make progress as we move out of COVID and as some of these challenges start to ease. And so we also collected a survey. We had 15 institutions, again, voluntarily providing us feedback on the process of the data collection, how this data is being utilized on their campuses, and kind of giving us an idea of what they're doing on their campuses to try to move the needle in terms of their food-related emissions. And so some key insights from the survey is that almost 3/4 of the participating institutions said that they have either set or are in the process of defining food-related greenhouse gas reduction targets for their own campuses. So you'll recall that as a collective, we set a reduction goal of 25% reduction in food-related emissions by 2030. But many of our institutions, our participating institutions, are now setting goals specific to their programs and their operations, which is really encouraging. Some of these targets and benchmarking have been put on hold because of COVID, but many are now actually reporting these food-related emissions to their universities as part of larger Scope 3 emissions initiatives and sustainability initiatives on the campus. And so many that aren't reporting these to their campuses are planning to do so in the future. And it was interesting to see what strategies our campuses are using to help reduce their food-related emissions. So these, in order of popularity in terms of how many of them are being implemented, are these top strategies. So number one was implementing efforts to reduce food waste. Every single institution that provided a response to this survey indicated that they are actively working to reduce food waste. You see also many are implementing protein flips or reducing portions of meat-based dishes. Many are creating new plant-forward menu concepts. Many are incorporating more plant-based meat alternatives and also working on marketing plant-forward dishes to customers. So I can't imagine a better set of tools in our toolkit than what we saw in the research showcase, and all of the wonderful initiatives going on in the Education and Systems Innovation Working Group are very much aligned with the interests of the university dining programs in terms of what they're looking to do on their campuses. So this was very exciting. And so as we move into 2022, it is time now to look towards the data collection for 2021. And one of the things that we heard in terms of feedback from our participating institutions is that as many of them are beginning to increase the transparency of their emissions reporting, there were an increasing number of different types of reports that they are needing to provide. And so one of the loudest requests that we heard from our members is that some of them are very interested in providing a more robust data set that incorporates all of their food purchases. One, to gain a more robust estimate of their food-related emissions, but also so that they're not having to tease apart multiple reports, some for their own institutions, some for MCURC, some for other initiatives. And so for this round of data collection, we are going to allow anyone who's interested, this is optional, but we will allow anyone who's interested to submit more robust food purchasing data with more food categories in order to take a look at kind of their holistic portfolio of emissions categories. Those that wish to remain reporting on the protein portfolio can do so. We will continue to offer that option. And we're also very excited to be working on a health-based indicator for our food purchases. And again, the goals behind this are to, one, we want to align MCURC data collection with other data reporting to help streamline the process for institutions. This is, again, very voluntary, and we want to make this as easy as possible for our members to continue to participate. And then we also want to more robustly understand the scale of the health impact of our collective purchases. So this is a project that is very near and dear to Sophie and my hearts that we have been working on, but we're hoping with more robust food purchase data, we can actually pilot an indicator that looks at the healthfulness of these food purchases as well. And so I will be reaching out later this month or early in February to begin the data collection for 2021. So please stay tuned for more details. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, Jackie Bertoldo at stanford.edu. And with that, I am very pleased to pass the baton to Pat Bando, who is the Associate Vice President for Auxiliary Services at Boston College, and Christopher Williams, who is Chef and General Manager of Mean Greens Cafe and Mean Green Acre for the dining services at University of North Texas, are incredible co-chairs of the MCURC Racial Equity Working Group. Take it away.
Good morning. So this is going to be a duet with Chris. Chris, are you there?
I'm here. How are you guys doing?
Okay, we have you by phone. So it's going to be a duet with Chris and myself. There he is. Truly the star of the show. Let me say that. So go ahead. We're going to introduce ourselves, and then Chris will tell you about what we've done so far, right?
Right. Good morning, everybody. I'm Christopher Williams. I'm an assistant director here with the dining services at the University of North Texas. I'm also, as Jackie said, the chef and general manager of our all-vegan dining facility, Mean Greens. I've been here for about 6 years now, just trying to innovate what we do here and provide the utmost experience for the people that dine here. So I'm pleased to be a part of this. Thank you, Sophie and Eric, for having us.
I'm Pat Bando, Associate Vice President of Auxiliary Services here at Boston College. I bring to the table my years of experience here at Boston College, which totals up to be something like 27 years, but who's really counting? Good thing, you don't cut people in half to count the rings around them like you do trees. Oops. Anyways, plus my years of experience as a food service director, not only here, but at Cornell University. I bring also to the table my years of experience of working with a diverse population, and being a person of diversity myself, I know what it's like to be on the receiving end and on the giving end. And I think that combination that Chris and I bring to this bigger table of MCURC is what we all have to look forward to. Right, Chris?
Definitely. For us, the pandemic has kind of slowed our working group down a little bit. We're pulling the members in right now, but Pat and I, we spent a lot of time over the last few months trying to compile our thoughts and our perspective of where we're trying to go. And we have our goal down, and our goal for everyone within this conference is, how do we as college and university food service operators put our employees in the best position for growth from all aspects, from color to age and things of that nature. And with that, we think we have a great basis to bring a really good core criteria to the MCURC, and to help people understand that we as food service managers need to help boost growth within our departments as far as people learning new things and things of that nature. I think the biggest thing for us as professionals is that we have to be accountable for what we do, and we have to also engage our employees. And I think as food service professionals, we need to learn to think outside the box and engage all employees. And I think as our working group gets going and we're able to spread our message, hopefully we can get some feedback that allows us to help to pass that properly, so that we're all thinking forward and trying to diversify our cultures in our workplaces.
Right. And so what we've gotten started is came up with a theme. Our working theme right now is opportunities to change lives. So our breaking through the color barrier. Let us look outside of the box, as Chris said. Where's the industry currently stand, and where can we go? How do we get past the visuals which lead to preconceived impressions. Is it the hair, the name, the piercings, those tattoos, the home address, the photo, what is it, etc. Let's get past that. The opportunities that we can bring for changing lives. As food service managers, can we be the pipeline to make people amazing? Although the pandemic has prevented us from actively pulling all of our MCUR members into this group, as Chris said, we've been meeting pre-fall semester. We were meeting monthly and then periodically through the pandemic fall semester, as we've been trying to just get things going on our own campuses, let alone for this committee. But we think we're ready to rock and roll now. So right now, Chris is going to give you our outlines of things that we think are opportunities for this group, working group.
So the first one for us, I think, is that it starts with us. As long as we all are very cognizant and understand that we are the pipeline for our employees. We are the way that people get ahead. We are their opportunity. If it wasn't for people giving me an opportunity, I wouldn't be where I am today. And, you know, to believe in your staff and understand that everybody's capable, no matter where they come from, their background, who they know, where they came from. It is up to us to pass on the knowledges that we've acquired over the years. A big thing for me coming up in this industry was professionalism and accountability. I've always been accountable for my own actions, and that was taught to me early on in this. And being in the industry over 16 years, I've learned at every level that professionalism and accountability are the two things that will take you places. But being able to pass that to my staff is everything as well. I'm really big on promote from within, train your staff to take your job. If you don't go into it with that kind of mindset, then you are limiting yourself and basically limiting the next person from possibly being as great as they can be. And for us as professionals from all walks of life, we have to understand that everybody doesn't get the same opportunity. And I think that now we're in a position with the conversation of diversity over the past couple of years, with being able to provide that experience to anyone, from your line cook to a steward to your upper management. Everybody has somewhere they would like to go, but everybody needs help understanding how to get there, and that falls on us. So I think our biggest goal for our group is opportunity. And I can't stress that enough. Without opportunity, people can't grow, or people can't go somewhere else. So hopefully over time with our working group, we get some good feedback from other people who may not have thought about it on this level, who may not have had any experiences with people of color, age, demographic, gender identity, things of that nature, because these are all very forefront conversations for a lot of people now with the conversation of diversity. So we're hoping that we can give good information over the next few meetings and things like that to help diversify your workforce or our workforce, and you know, and also think about how diversity efforts fail, and anywhere you may have tried to diversify but couldn't understand why it didn't work, and being able to think about those things, put them together, talk about it with other people you work with, and be able to provide a new experience for the next person. I think that is the biggest goal for our group, is that with diversity, we have to provide the opportunity.
That's the equation. Diversity could equal opportunity. And that's what we see in our kind of non-mathematical way, but what Chris has identified there for us. And so with that said, we do currently have a short list of MCR volunteers who have expressed interest in this committee that has been forwarded to us. So we will be reaching out to you all this spring semester, because I think we've been able to get our lives here on our campuses in better control as we've worked our ways through this pandemic. So we're reaching out to you. And if there are others who are part of this conversation that we're having today who are interested in volunteering, I'm sure you could reach out through the leadership of MCRC, of your interests, and help and be assigned to this committee. And we promise we'll get back to you. Chris, what else do we want to tell this committee about these members?
I feel like, are we out of time already? Are we close?
No, I think we have a couple minutes, don't we?
Awesome.
We got a couple more minutes.
A couple more minutes, yeah. So the last thing that I have for this is also our food service management with culinary operations in college and university food service. Proper tools, skill training, and the ownership from the skills that we learn, and making sure that people once again are accountable and confident in the things that you are engaging them in. And engagement is going to be a big one for everybody here. Engage your staff. Find out what people want to do with their lives, and if that falls into what they're doing for you. Some people might not want to be there for 20 years, but we might provide them an opportunity 5 or 10 years down the road for them to make their own monumental steps and become the person that they are looking to be. And, you know, just recognize diversity takes many forms. It's not just color, it's not just age, it's a whole. Know who you're working with, understand your staff, understand that we are the change. You know, and as the change, we have to be very cognizant in your operations and understanding that you are giving somebody a skill in life. And when you're doing that and you're making sure they're good, they will be okay. And I'm a testament to that. And that's the biggest thing that I have to bring to this diversity council. Sorry about that.
Yes, and so as we conclude with this little introduction as to who we are and what we're doing to help MCURC and this diversity outlet that we're composing here, we welcome you to help us and volunteer on this committee. With that, I say thank you.
Thank you both so much. So grateful for your leadership and really your ability to build upon this great tendrils of work around advancing racial equity as relates to healthy, sustainable, delicious food choices. We have had many dialogues as an MCURC community now. This moment is a great culmination point and the beginning, as you said, of a point of action that really focuses on that pivotal opportunity gap and the racial disparities that have been no surprise and have been highlighted among many in the restaurant industry, the classic front of house, back of house, but also particularly in college and university dining settings, this tremendous disparity in leadership versus staff. And so I think that this focus area that you two have identified is just spot on, and we're so excited to support you and the working group going forward with this goal. So really, again, just thank you so much to you both, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. This is concludes the day one of the 7th annual MCURC all-member meeting. Really appreciate the outstanding research showcase, just such a breadth of work. Clearly, some common themes throughout, a focus on what works for shifting diets, right? Again, especially plant-forward, climate-friendly, and the whole range of tools in the toolkit. And you saw, as Jackie mentioned, collective impact, there's all of these efforts are interconnected, and this is by design. The work that we do together is synergistic. It's many, many threads being woven together, the different perspectives that all of you bring, the different resources that all of you bring, whether you're in operations, nutrition, sustainability, academic faculty, and tomorrow you're going to be hearing from students as well. And we just could not imagine a more integrated and holistic way to look at the opportunity to advance healthy, sustainable, delicious food choices through research, education, and innovation than by working with all of you. So my sincere thanks, and thanks to Eric, my fabulous co-director, for joining us today and sharing that terrific welcome. Again, thanks to our sponsors for those inspiring videos and for your terrific partnership. Join us tomorrow back here in the virtual space, 8:30 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Pacific. We have in store for you the crowd favorite, again, of the Data Central presentation from Colleen McClellan, focused on the Plant Forward Opportunity Report that was developed in collaboration actually with the CIA and the MCURC Research Working Group. We have our Student Fellows Showcase and a special research showcase focused on kind of a deep dive. This was the rapid fire version today, but tomorrow is really a deep dive into a research study that involved a huge number of chefs across the MCURC. That's just incredible illustration of the power of tapping the collective wisdom and culinary creativity of our culinary colleagues, and that's the olive oil presentation that you'll hear tomorrow. So you won't want to miss it, as Ghislaine said in the chat. And with that, we'll give you 5 minutes back in your day. We know how busy all of you are. Thank you for taking the time to join us. And thank you for continuing to be on this rocket ship. All of you, especially amid the pandemic, have faced one new challenge after the next. And yet this unification that we share around this common language, this common trajectory of healthy and sustainable food choices for all, is really continues to be energizing and essentially a magnet for all of us to work together, even on top of what for many of you is double duty in your day jobs. So we appreciate it. We look forward to all that's ahead. And most immediately, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.